and welcome to another episode of the Young Conductors Podcast.
We are your hosts, Sean and Cole, two conductors on a mission to encourage, educate, and inspire young conductor teachers. Welcome back, everyone, for another season of Young Conductors. We were so excited to have those 8 episodes last season, and Sean and I had a great time chatting with all the wonderful people and sharing all the things that we talk about in isolation to putting it to the masses. And now we're officially back for another season, which is really exciting. So we have a very special episode today. We are welcoming the wonderful Dr. Shelley Axelson from Radford University, where I'm actually at right now for my graduate degree. And she's the director of bands, and we are so excited to have her. So welcome, Dr. Axelson.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we're very excited.
Yeah, for sure. So to get started, we would love the million-dollar question for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are now.
Okay, I'm going to put my glasses on because I have to think, and it helps me. So I warned my music ed students about this question, the tell us about yourself question, because I hate this question so much. The good thing, but only because it's so open-ended, which is actually the good thing about it, because in an interview, you can steer it, right, to where you want it to go. But I'm assuming that the audience is going to want to sort of know my professional chronology. So that's what I'll focus on. So, I'll just start with college, and then we can fill in other blanks if we need to. Okay. So I did my undergraduate degree at the University of South Florida in Tampa, and went straight to the University of Michigan to get my master's in conducting with H. Robert Reynolds. Then I went back to Florida and I taught middle school. And then I went to Richardson, Texas, where I taught junior high. And yes, they're different. Middle school and junior high are actually a little different down in the South in Florida and Texas. And then I had the opportunity to go get my doctorate at Northwestern with Mallory Thompson, who I also studied with at USF, and also Jerry Junkin and Mike Voda at USF, but more on that later.
There's just so many big names.
Yeah,
I know, and I don't want to be like a name dropper. This is all lucky, just luck. But we'll hit that again, I'm sure. Then after Northwestern, I went and taught at Central College in Pella, Iowa, I think I was there for 3 years, and then the University of Indianapolis for 6. Then I was at Montclair State University for a long time. It's either 12 or 14 years, I forget. And then I took a gap year. So I think we should normalize the gap year for all humans and conductors, especially, right? To take a minute. I mean, the reasons I did that were not professional. They were personal. My dad has dementia, and I went home to Texas to help my mom, and some other reasons too, just to unplug. So I did that for a year, and then the opportunity to come to Radford happened. It was an interim position, fall of 22. And I did that, and then things went fairly well. And so I got the full-time job, or the tenure track job. And so now I'm in my 2nd year at Radford.
Great. Congratulations. So you've definitely been through lots of age groups.
Yes.
Yeah. Right now I'm teaching middle school, and it's quite a different beast than, than lots of other things.
Yes. It is very.
But you're also teaching some elementary school too, so that's right. You got the double whammy.
That's even more. Right.
So Dr. Axelson, why did you decide to be a music teacher and now a conductor? Well, both.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I knew that I wanted to be a teacher pretty early. I really loved school. I loved learning. I just loved it. So in 1st grade, I thought, I'm going to be a 1st grade teacher. And in 2nd grade, I thought, I'm going to be a 2nd grade teacher. And then, as I sort of just went along. And then once I found music, I just knew that I would be a music teacher of some kind. And then for the conducting, this is now my origin story, like in my superhero origin story. So it was a particular day which is really kind of awesome to be able to point to a moment in history when another bit of luck. So it was February 2nd, 1985, and I was a sophomore in high school and in Florida, and I was playing in the Hillsborough County Honor Band, principal bass clarinet. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. And the conductor was Jerry Junkin. And I remember that it was just so, I mean, everything about the whole experience was great, the rehearsals and all that. And then at the performance, I sort of lost consciousness for a moment. Like I didn't pass out, but like if you know about flow, right, and the flow experience and that sort of thing, it was the first time that it ever happened. So I don't remember being outside of myself, but I remember coming back into myself, right? And I was still playing, and just tears were running down my face. And I just was like, I don't know what's happening here, but I love it. And so, yeah. And I like to tell a story because I was standing in line after the concert with my mom to talk to Jerry Junkin, to say thank you. And, I would say get a selfie, but there were no selfies. This is 1985, right? So, we hadn't imagined them yet. But anyway, so we waited in line, and I got up for my turn, and I took a breath to say thank you, and I just started bawling. Like I just couldn't even control myself. It was crazy. And he was so generous, of course, right? He just gave me a hug, and he was like, write it all down and send it to me. Just send me a letter, which I eventually did. So, and then it was like 2 days of just being in my room and crying, and like it scared the heck out of my parents. I guess they were like, what is happening? Are you okay? And I'm like, yes, I'm so happy. I don't know. So from that moment, then it was like that. I want to do that. I want to conduct. I want to teach like that. I want to interact with that. I love in the repertoire, right? So that was when it just became, I want to be a band director. And then that's where it started.
Yeah. How special you were able to go work with him for some of your undergrad, to have that experience with him at the honor band and then transition into learning from him. I feel like that is just so special in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's why I went to USF, was to study with him. And then it turned out that after my first year is when he went to UT Austin, where he still is. But then even that, more luck. So then we had an interim, Michael Voda, who was amazing and was my basic conducting teacher. And then the year after that, Mallory Thompson came, right? So just in 3 years, like just by showing up to class in 3 years, I had 3 great conductors and conducting pedagogues. So it was amazing.
Yeah. So what was the moment you knew you wanted to go into a master's degree in conducting? Was that like a difficult choice for you?
No, it wasn't at all. It would have been, I think, under different circumstances, but my particular circumstances, the way it came up was when Mallory Thompson got there, she started a summer conducting symposium, and it was like 2 weeks long, and three different clinicians. She was always one, of course, but then 2 others over the course of 2 weeks. So in that time, now get ready for like the luckiest thing you've ever heard. Like she brought in everybody in the wind conducting world came to this symposium, and she told me that if I organized it, I could be a participant for free. So I was like, crazy. Yes, please. Right. Yes, please. So, I mean, you name them, I was able to work with them. And one of those people was H. Robert Reynolds, who was at the University of Michigan. So he came to the symposium, and I got a chance to work with him and talk to him. And that was kind of like an audition process. You know what I mean? And so then I thought, and with Mallory Thompson's encouragement, of course, she was like, you should apply because, you never know when someone's going to retire, or like, this is H. Robert Reynolds. Like he's taught everyone else you've worked with, he taught all of us, right? So if you have an opportunity, right? So I applied and auditioned and was accepted. So I was like, I'm going.
Yeah.
Right. Like that, you can't not go. I mean, it was the most incredible, lucky experience ever. So Now I think it might be a little harder for me to make that decision. If it hadn't happened that way, I might have spent more time weighing the pros and cons about teaching first and then going and get the master's, because I know a lot of people ask me this question. I get this question a lot, should I teach first or should I go straight on? And, only you can answer the question for yourself, but I know a lot of people won't accept master's students now unless they have some teaching experience, which I totally understand. I think that for myself, some advantages were that I didn't really have a lot of bad habits, and I was still in that sort of open, like spongy sort of, whatever you teach me, I'm going to do kind of thing, which was nice at the foundation, especially if you're with a great conductor and teacher. But, the disadvantage is I had never really had my own group.
Mm-hmm.
So, I went from the University of South Florida, and then the groups that I worked with were at the University of Michigan, right? Probably some of the best groups I've ever been in front of, right? And so at 23, was I really ready for that? I mean, in some ways, yes, but I could see making an argument that experience may have had a little bit more, I don't want to say depth, but you know what I mean, a little more resonance at the time if I had been bringing in a little more experience. Because still now I'll be teaching in a class or driving down the road and I'll think that's what Professor Reynolds meant. Or that's what, like, I'll hear myself say something that Mallory Thompson or Jerry Junkin or Michael, any of these people said, and I'm like, oh, now I get it. Right. And so maybe those sort of moments would have happened earlier if I had taught. I don't know. I really don't know. There's no way to know.
Yeah. I wanted to highlight something you had mentioned. You said something about how the symposium kind of acted as an audition process or an interview process for your future graduate degree. I think that's something important to remember, that you never really know who is watching you, like with the things that you're doing. So it's important to always have that in the back of your mind, for sure.
That's right. And do conducting symposia.
Yeah.
If you can. I mean, on the band side, there's so many. There's lots and lots and lots to choose from. I don't know as much about the others for choral or orchestral, but even if you aren't ready to go and like get up and conduct, there's always a participant level and an observation level. At least go to one and watch days full of conductors getting feedback, right? And that's going to change. You can, and then take that right back to your own groups. And then just before you feel you're ready, you should be a participant. Because it's just so incredibly helpful. And I would say a lot of conductors now with people who have master's programs the audition isn't really just enough, right? Because there's so many applicants. And if you have the opportunity to interact, right? So it's not just like you're on the podium and they're interacting with you and that's amazing, but you're at lunch and you're joking around in between pieces and they get a sense of who you are and how you interact with people. It's incredibly valuable information when you're trying to choose master's students.
Yeah.
So it's just
because you're memorable in that moment. It's like you're no longer just a video applicant. It's like, oh, I remember Sean and him talking about blah 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 blah.
Right, and I remember him. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say how you remember how they made you feel in that moment.
That's right. Or when something was going wrong with the camera, I remember that guy, Sean. He was the one that jumped up and tried to help. Or Cole, he was the one that was always there early, setting up chairs and stands.
Yeah.
Right. That's sort of, all of those little things matter a lot, because the graduate student to teacher relationship is a very important one. I mean, it's a real investment that you make in each other. Right. And it's not just your lessons. Right. It's you live there. You interact all the time. You are helping teach classes, you are helping organize things. Like, you got to have a good vibe, you got to have a good feeling and rapport with each other. So the more often you interact with someone, I think that helps your chances.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. That's great advice.
Yeah, it is. Thanks for sharing that with us. So to transition into the topic of today's episode, which is how to practice conducting, I'm wondering, do you remember any challenges that you faced as a young aspiring conductor teacher? And that could be during your undergrad, during your master's, and during your doctoral degree. Is there anything that like pops out to your head to think about the challenges?
Yeah, and it's a challenge that I still have. I would think we all have, is that we practice without an instrument, right?
Mhm.
So we're practicing basically our version of scales and long tones and things like that. But it's like audiating, being able to audiate but not sing until you're in front of a group of people.
Yeah.
Right. So I can practice all I want, the physical movements and do my study and make all the decisions, but I'm not really conducting until I'm influencing sound.
Mhm.
Right. So like conducting in my living room, which I do a lot because I got to practice a transition, or I'm trying to practice going from 164 to 140, which is kind of a tricky one I'm working on now. Like slamming on the brakes is a lot easier than just, going from 164 to 120. But
Right.
anyway, so, I practice with my metronome and I'm doing all the things, but I don't really know if it's going to work until I'm in front of people. And
Mhm.
so it's important that you make sure that your students, the musicians you're working with, understand that when you're in rehearsal, you're practicing too. Right. So I want to say, I would imagine it's at least once a week, if not every rehearsal, that I'll say, we'll stop for something and I'll whatever, we'll rehearse a little bit. And then I'll say, can we go back actually a little further? Because I need to practice that transition one more time. So let's go all the way back and let's come through here, get that again, so that they're aware that I know I'm making mistakes. I'm practicing.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So, and I think they love that because they have to practice. They get to do it in isolation with their instruments, but we don't, and they should understand that that's sort of the process. So I would say that's the biggest challenge, is not being able to practice with the instrument.
Right. And I feel like a lot of the young conductors that I witness in the music ed program and people giving us feedback and thoughts and opinions, they just really feel unsure of what to do in their isolation. Because I think a lot of people are looking for some type of feedback, whether it's from their private conducting teacher, there's not that person that's on the other side of them. It's like, that wasn't clear.
Mhm.
And so I wonder if you have any thoughts about any of that, or any things that you share in your own experience. I mean, I know we can share maybe some insight on what Sean and I have felt in our own conducting, but have you felt that of any of your own conducting students? Anybody questioning any of that?
Yeah, everybody. That's how I know they're going to be really good. Right? Yeah. The person who's like, I'm ready, I got it all figured out. Don't hire that guy.
Yeah.
I think part of what you have to accept in being a conductor is that, you're never done. Like, just being a
Mhm.
musician, right? You're always going to be working on things. I think though, if we're talking about movement, right? Like what do I do here? I think that question is not a physical, technical question. That's a study question,
Mhm.
because the music will tell you how to move, but you have to find the answers, right? And I mean,
Right.
I could show you a gesture, but now you're just going to look like me, which is not the worst thing in the world, which we can talk about in a minute, but to borrow a gesture here and there. But, well, what do I do here? I don't know. What do you want here? Is always my question. And if you can articulate that, then we're there.
Yeah.
Then,
Mhm.
okay, so because usually I can tell you what almost always happens if I say, okay, well, what do you want? What do you want this to sound like? And someone will start describing it or singing it or trying, communicating that. And while they're doing that, they are doing a perfect gesture.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it's like, well, why don't you just do that? Right. But because it's not in the conducting book, or it's not, you know what I mean? Like anything that looks like the music is going to be fine. Anything that looks like the music is going to be fine. Now, sometimes our groups need us to be a little clearer, right? So the harder something is for them to play or sing, the easier it must look from us, right? Like complete confidence, really clear, maybe just clicky. Just let me lay this out for you. I believe in you. And then, go back once that's over. But the larger, and those you'll find, right? If you're showing something super expressively and the group's not together, try being a little clearer. Did it get better? Then that's how you do it. But again, it's in rehearsal that you have to figure that. How do I show it? Try something, and then we'll go from there.
Right. I think some issues that I've faced in my own to get to that point was being able to feel comfortable in my body up on the podium. And I think some of the best advice that I've ever been told is, it might sound a little weird to some folks, but just bear with me. But somebody told me that conducting is really just like a dance. And that's kind of changed everything, the way that I look at my body and being up on the podium. And I think I see a lot of young conductors feel disconnected from their body. Like maybe their torso is not connected to their feet, for example, right? And I think something that I can suggest that I've done on my own is just stand in front of a mirror, y'all, and super on some music and just dance. Just be weird. And it feels weird, but moving your arms and your body and everything, and just feel super connected, because I feel in order to show what the music is suggesting is you have to be able to put it in your own body. And if you're not disconnected and willing to look weird in front of your musicians, and you're not going to be able to be successful. So be weird and dance is the two things that come to mind when feeling comfortable with that. So
100%. And I do movement in my conducting classes, and I exactly what you just said, Cole, exactly is what I tell young conductors all the time. The only thing that I would change is I would never look in the mirror, because then you're welcoming judgment. Because you're the worst judge ever of ourselves. Right? We are always harder on ourselves than anyone else would ever dare to be. Right. So
that actually does hit pretty true.
Right. So the same exercise, right? And any music, it can be Beethoven, it can be Maslanka, it can be Billy Joel. I don't care who you're listening to, but you do have to understand how your body responds to sound, because I don't know what a suspension feels like to you. I know what it feels like to me, and that's the gesture that I use for it, the baseline gesture that I would use for it. But you have to know where it feels in your body, so that we can create a gesture that represents you being you, and not you being me or somebody else. It's so valuable. Go out dancing. It's literally an assignment in my class. Go dancing. Go out. Go dancing.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, right. That's super
That's an
good,
easy
right?
homework assignment. Yeah, I'm getting into it.
Oh yeah, everybody gets an A on that one.
Right.
I wanted to touch on something you had mentioned. If you don't have what you want it to sound like in your head, then you're right. It is impossible to show something that's going to look like anything that you want it to sound like. It's just, you have to have a very clear idea of what you want the sound to be. I've definitely been in a rehearsal where I didn't actually know what I wanted those two measures to sound like, and I just kind of go through it. It's okay, I really need to go back. I need to study this and make sure this is how I want it to sound. So that's something that's pretty important, just making sure you know exactly what you want on every single note of the piece. And also, one thing I wanted to say, it is very easy to steal a gesture from someone else, but that doesn't work all the time. I could see something that Dudamel does, and it's I'm gonna do that, and then I do it, and it looks so dumb because it's not authentic, and it's not what I would do. So with that, we have another question. How does a young conductor work on looking like themselves versus just another conductor that they see?
I think it's important for people to understand, for young conductors to understand, number one, what you just said, Sean, about being in a rehearsal and thinking, I don't really know what I want. That's okay. That's okay. Like, give yourself a little grace, right? Because you're learning. So maybe you think you decided, and then you hear it and you're like, wait, that's not what I thought it would be. And I'm not really sure what to do. Then just go through it, punt to the next rehearsal, and then you can do your study. But I think we have to make sure that we understand that we're learning this new instrument. So you wouldn't, to a second year player, start criticizing the pitch and the altissimo register. Like, they're beginners, right? We're beginners. So be kind to yourself on that. I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
Oh, it was how does a young conductor work on looking like themselves versus a conductor that they watch?
Yeah. Okay. So again, we come right back to the movement, and you have to practice conducting, right? There are technical things that you practicing exercises that you can do that I'm happy to share. I can describe them to you on this, or I could I could send you like some exercises that you could then put out. I don't, everybody's welcome to them. Very few are original anyway, right? So I'm happy to share that. So you have to work on two tracks. You have to be becoming a better musician yourself. So whatever your principal instrument is, or if you're a singer, however you make music, you need to become extraordinary at that, because you can't ask people to do what you've never experienced. It won't occur to you. So become a great musician. And the movement, that's part of your musicianship, because it's going to make you a better singer if you dance. It's going to make you a better oboe player if you dance to Beethoven, right? So that all of that is one track. And then the other track is that you have to just practice the technique of it. The scales, the long tones, the stuff that we don't love to practice, but we know makes us better. And that's true in conducting too. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Okay, my now I'm thinking of all these exercises, and I'm like,
yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to. So you mentioned like the scales and long tones of conducting, and for that, is that just like little exercises, like let's conduct 4 bars of piano and then 4 bars of mezzo forte? Like, is that kind of the thing that you do, or do you have something else like completely different than that?
No, things like that. Things like that. So if there's a woman who taught conducting to so many people out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, named Elizabeth Green. You might know her book, The Modern Conductor. It was a textbook that was used in conducting classes for a long time. She has a lot of exercises in that book that I've stolen, and some of them are just like you move your arms up and you're just sort of investigating your space, and then out, and making sure your timing is up and down the same speed. So those sort of arm exercises, and then things like independence exercises where I'll do 1 bar of 2, 1 bar of 6/8, 1 bar of 7/8, 1 bar of 3, 1 bar, like it's just a long string. And then you conduct through those, and then you decide which ones are going to be right hand, both left hand, both hands. And then after you get that, you add dynamic differences, then you add articulation differences, and you just keep layering on it till it gets so hard you can't do it. And then you're really learning, right? If you can do it, it's too easy and you're probably not learning. So independence exercises, things like that. Do you want me to keep going and talking about different exercises, or?
Sure.
Okay. Another thing that I did is when I taught middle school and junior high, which was really important for my practicing conducting, but also sensitizing the group to my conducting. It's a thing that I borrowed from Mallory Thompson. She called it psychological conducting. I call it persuasive conducting. It's the same thing, where you write a 4-measure rhythm exercise, no pitch, and you don't do eighth notes. just whole notes, whole rest, half notes, half rest, quarter notes, quarter rest. That's it. And I can explain why in a minute. So you write this 4-measure rhythm, and then I have it in front of me. And I would have my students all write these 4-measure things. I would collect them, and I kept them on a stack on the piano. And then once a week at least, I would take one off the stack. I would put it in front of me. Now they can't see it. Only I can see it. So I have to make them play that. Right. So it's then I'm doing this, and I'm doing cutoffs, and I'm doing trying to get articulations. And it's a way to really clean your technique. Because if you have extra motions, if you have like scoopy loopies on 3 or on the outside beats, or you're doing backbeat and subdividing, you're not going to get it. It's not going to work. And that's to help you clean your technique. I really like that one.
Yeah.
A lot. And plus, the kids love it because they're like, oh, this one, I wrote this one. She'll never get this one. And so that's fun. And then I'll just say one other thing, and I can say more later, but this, because I think it's undervalued because it seems so simple, but whatever your less dominant hand is, use it more in your life. So I'm right-handed. So if you want your left hand to be more independent, you have to allow it to be independent, right? So brush your teeth with your less dominant hand. Unlock the door with a key with your less dominant hand. Just make it a thing that you do, that you try to use your weaker hand to do everyday things, and it will help get that build that independence.
Yeah. I really like the psychological conducting. I might try that out.
Yeah, me too.
It's
funny because your students think they're going to stump you. You know, it's like give it a challenge, make it really hard for me.
Yeah, and they love it. They're like, "Oh, she'll never get it," and then you don't, and then they're laughing. And I'm like, "If you're the one, you could say that was perfect," and no one would really know because they don't see it. But the spirit of the game, right? And if we're going to go with this, like, "Hey, I'm practicing too," then you could just be like, "No, that wasn't it. Okay, let me try again." And they're like, "Yeah." And you're like, "No, I'll get it. Give me another shot." You know, that kind of thing. So that's great for the community and your culture and your ensemble. Like all of that is good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's why
I'm curious. Yeah, everybody steals everything, so we're going to steal that from you now. So thank you. I'm curious, what do you think about practicing the recordings? I know people are have their own opinions about this, and I see your eyebrows raising. So give it to us. What do you think?
About this. Okay. No. No. You cannot. You cannot. And I'm going to tell you why. If I get so riled up about this one. Okay. So when I see someone, I can tell immediately when someone's been conducting two recordings. Mm-hmm. First of all, the better the group, the further behind the beat the sound is going to come. Okay. So in my middle school band, it was pretty much right there on the ictus point. My group now, it's a smudge behind. Great professional orchestras are sometimes an entire beat behind because they're watching to see and reacting, right? Because that's what conducting is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be here. I'm going to show you exactly what to do. It's going to be here. I'm going to show you, then you give me, and we're going to collaborate, right? Mm-hmm. And if you practice the recordings, you're going to get used to the sound happening right on the ictus beat and on the ictus point. And when it doesn't, you're going to slow down and wait for them. And then they're going to slow down and wait for you. And then you're going to slow down. And now it's a dance where nobody's leading. And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. The other thing is that your job is to influence and make impact on the sound. And if you're not used to that, then whatever gesture you're doing to the recording works great. And then you're going to take that, into a live rehearsal, and it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to know what to do because
Right.
it worked with the recording. That's like it worked with in the practice room.
Right.
So recording, and I was raised with this philosophy, right? So like, this is what my teachers told me. And so of course that's what I believe. And then, but over time, now that I see it in my students, I'm like, they'll do 4 bars and I'll say, what recording did you use? And they'll answer because they know, don't lie, because I already know the jig is up. But now here's the thing, because some people, and myself included, sometimes I'm like, can I just hear it? Like, can I just hear a run through of this piece once before I tackle it? And the answer is yes, you can. But you can't hear it once. You can hear it 5 or 6 times. So you can listen to recordings. I'm not saying that you have to like just do all your work at the piano, although that's better. But if you're going to listen to a recording, please listen to many, many different ones.
Yeah.
So that you don't get lured into someone else's interpretation. And please don't move. You can move to them. You can dance to them. All you want, all day long, dance to the recording, but you cannot actually conduct because it's going to give you bad habits that are really hard to break.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got really bossy about that one.
No, it's great.
No, yeah, I think it's
But
great.
I really have seen that it's true. It really is. You can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very.
And I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's the reason it's coming so prominent is because it's just so easy to just say, I'm not really gonna study this. I'm just gonna listen, and then boom, I got it. So that's the problem. It's just so easy to lay back and do that type of thing. But I agree. I think when I listen to recordings, I like listening to several different ones. And then you can even get ideas like, oh, I kind of like how they did that bar, but I don't like how they did this. And you can kind of create your own from their interpretations, which I think is sometimes helpful.
It's incredibly helpful. And I'm sorry to jump back in, but because I'll forget if I don't say it right away. As long as when you're listening to those different recordings, it's like, okay, so this conductor had them breathe after the second bar, and this conductor didn't. And then the good news is you don't have to pick because they're probably both great conductors. That's what you would. So what you do is on your notepad or however you take notes while you're studying, because you can't answer every question in one study session. Right. Write that question. Breath after bar 2. If so, why? If not, why not? It's not just deciding that I'm going to do a breath there or we're going to do a breath there. Why? That's study, not deciding.
Yeah.
Knowing why you decided. That's when you've made a decision, which you can change, which is what I love. If you get into rehearsal and you have them do the breath and you're like, that does not sound good on us. Or, you know what I mean? But if your decision was based on this piece, like for me, this as a band director, this piece is based on a vocal piece. So there is no breath here, right? There's no punctuation here, or there's a period here. That in the original, so we should take a breath. Like, you know, you understand what I'm saying? So the answer comes from informed. The answer is informed by study.
Yeah.
I think something Dr. Bowen does also, which is I am trying to be more cognizant about, is decentering that decision. So sometimes she'll come in with the question already ahead of time. It's like, should we breathe here or not? And then she puts it up to the ensemble. It's like, let's try it. What do we think? So it's not only you making that decision, but you're helping lead your singers. I mean, you already probably know the answer. It's like, well, you know, the punctuation suggests breathing here, but you put it to your ensemble, and so they're a part of that process, which I think is really cool.
Absolutely. You should totally do that. That's the teaching part of it, right? Yeah, for sure. You should engage, allow them to be involved with as many decisions. But Cole, you're right. You'll kind of have an idea because your opinion is probably, I would hope you're the best musician in the room at the time, right? So, but you do want to include them and you can lead them, you know, and that kind of stuff. But it's important for them to have that sort of thought process and thinking that way too.
Right. something I was going to say about recordings. It's just interesting to think about in my own experience. And I think that the way I listen to recordings now is not the way I listened to them when I first started practicing fine-tuning my conducting skills. Because back then, I would listen to them all the time and I would conduct them. Sean and I would both do that in our dorm room, right? And it's like, this feels great, but it's really because we didn't have access. Yeah, right. It's like, but we didn't have access to a group. We didn't have access to musicians. And so I think the majority of our listeners are either in their undergraduate degree. We have I think 3 different types. We have the people in high school that are looking at pursuing music. We have the people in their undergraduate degrees. And then we have people in their graduate studies. But for the folks that are in their undergraduate degrees, I think my biggest recommendation is just get some friends together. If you are a choral music ed major and you want to get 4 friends, different voice parts together in a room to just sing through some stuff. Even now, my friends and I have these things called sight reading parties, or we'll just come together or sit in the living room and we'll sing through music. But I think that is a really great opportunity for you to do something like that, where you can practice your conducting skills in front of a group. And getting more
100%. God, you are a nerd. I love you so much. I want to come to that party, but I can't. I would not be a good sight singer.
It'll be great. It'll be great. We can have a sight reading party for your voice rep that you're about to do for that recital, right? We could do a little party for that.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, did I just remind you?
No, yeah. Oh my gosh, I got to practice so bad for that. Okay.
For those of you listening, Dr. Axelson is participating in Radford's voice professor's recital. You are choir director, Dr. Bowen, the music ed professor, Dr. McDonald, and then Dr. Bardini, the voice professor, are all doing a little quartet, 3 pieces on her recital, which is going to be great.
Can I just say that I am so afraid of this experience, because I thought we would be doing a Britney mashup or something, right?
Right.
It would just be fun and silly, and we could just, but it's real repertoire. And now I'm oh gosh. Okay, so now I really have to practice.
Is it going to be live?
There will be no live stream. There will be no live stream. No.
They're doing, Sean, do you know Bring Me a Little Water, Sylvia? Have you heard that? Bring me a little water. They're doing that, and it has body percussion. And I told Dr. Axelson, I'm going to be the mom from Mean Girls that's out in the audience, recording, but doing it with jamming. I also told them that I think that they should dress up as the Golden Girls. I think that would be hilarious.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Wouldn't that be funny? I do love that idea. Yeah, I do like that idea a lot.
Because all 4 of you are blonde, so
it's a missed opportunity if you don't.
Right. Do it for us. Do it for me.
I will do it.
Great. Sorry, what were we talking about?
I agree. Back to your point of making your own group. I think that's incredibly valuable. And for my orchestra people out there, you can always do a string quartet or quintet, and then get a pretty good pianist to cover all the wind parts.
That's good.
You can find arrangements of the orchestral rep for sure that has the piano reductions, and that's always helpful. That's 4 or 5 people you can conduct, and they will, they'll tell you if you're doing good or not.
Yeah.
Well, you'll hear it too.
Right.
Yeah. And and I'm just trying to think about if for folks who are in a situation where there isn't a string quartet and a pianist, right, they could just do that on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think for instrumentalists can sing the parts too.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that. We do that in conducting classes, which I'll talk about in a minute. But also another exercise you could do is, if you are, you're studying, you're listening to different recordings, you're singing lines at a time, please take time to do that, to be at a piano and play just one line, but sing a different one. It's a great way to internalize a score. But if you can hear the piece, if you can be silent and hear the piece in your head, practice that way. Mm-hmm. Right. And record yourself. Because remember I said before about mirrors can be right? Because you're thinking about yourself while you're doing it. Instead, record, just put your iPhone up, push record, and do it without thinking about self-aware. Just do it.
Yeah.
And then watch the recording. But the singing parts, your other music ed nerds like we were, some still are. We used to do, Mallory Thompson did this at Northwestern. The advanced conducting class always ends with the Stravinsky octet, and we sing it. We would all sing it. And we're singing Stravinsky, right? That's not easy. So at first it's like, but by the end of the time that we're working on that, like we're really singing it. Like it's really kind of good. So you can tell your friends, like you don't have to be on the right pitches, just sing directionally and tell me if this is clear. Like, was it clear when you come in? I don't care what you sing, as long as it's, go in the right direction. So don't feel like you have to have people who can sight read the Stravinsky octet. You can,
Right.
like just getting through it is going to be valuable to everybody.
Yeah. And I think something I'm even practicing with right now, Dr. Bowen is helping me figure out, is not thinking about all of music being so vertical all the time. Like there's a lot of choral music, and I'm sure they're wind and string as well, but some of the music that I'm teaching right now is actually cellular. So there's these little like pockets of information that the composer uses throughout the whole piece, but changes it around. And so something I'm having to do is not think about asking everybody to do all 4 parts or all 8 parts at the same exact time, but isolating those cellular structures. So like if there's a melody, for example, that changes in between parts, maybe as you're practicing, if you can't have 8 parts singing at the same time, maybe you have them all sing the melody throughout, and you can practice conducting that way. It's just have you to be creative. And in like our other episodes, we've talked about creating opportunities for yourself, and I think we gave some ideas in that, but we also talked about like score study approaches. And like before you even conduct a note, I think knowing the score well enough, and Dr. Axelson has said, gave some tips already to learn the score, but you really have to be comfortable with it. Because if you get in front of a group to conduct it, like you're not going to know it well enough, and they're going to know you don't know it well enough. And it's like, how can you practice conducting if you don't even know the piece? So,
right, because you're not even really listening, and you're thinking about your conducting, and the chatter in your mind is so loud that you can't hear because you're thinking about the next meter change, and then you're going to end up accepting whatever they give you.
Right.
They're 12. Like that's not reasonable. You can't do that. That's not fair. And from an educational standpoint, what are you doing? Like, no, my teacher used to say the first rehearsal is your performance. Like performance ready at the first rehearsal, which makes the first couple of weeks really frustrating and boring for the conductor because you're like, seriously, like, because you never practiced with wrong notes, right? And now you're hearing them and you're like, but you got to know what you are advocating for this composer. You must know what she or he intended and already have filtered that through your interpretation and study and the opinions from so many others by listening to different performances and recordings. And then you can begin.
Right. Sean and I have some colleagues. I know that I know for sure that some of them don't start planning repertoire until like the week before classes start. And then it's kind of like, they're shuffling in, trying to get all this stuff done. And it's like, you are doing a disservice to not only you, but also your students by not internalizing all of this stuff as soon as possible, So for the teacher friends that out there is listening, it's like you're setting yourself up for failure in that way, and in turn setting up your students for failure. So I think,
and it sounds super stressful. Like that's super stressful. Like don't do that to yourself. That makes me nervous just even thinking about it, Plus then if you're still thinking surface level, then you'll only ask for surface level,
Right.
So
Yeah, and it's important for all of our listeners to know that not one way of study like works for everybody. Like for me, it's conducting. For me, it's playing the score on the piano and also singing lines, like you said. Like that is how I do most of my study, and that's what's most helpful for me. But for someone who doesn't have piano chops, like, don't try that, because you're just going to waste time and get frustrated. Like, just pull out your primary instrument and play the lines. So it's definitely important to find that one thing that works for you the best.
Yeah, agreed.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
It's all trial and error,
Mhm.
and I think Sean's right. I think you have to be, as a music teacher, actually, honestly, in any profession that anybody chooses, you have to be willing to make mistakes because you learn from those mistakes. Like, I've conducted a group, even right now, preparing for my graduate recital, and it hasn't been perfect every single time, but I'm like willing to like laugh it off and just like try something new. And so
Yeah.
I think if people take anything away, it's there's a lot of good tidbits in this conversation that we've had. But Sean's right. Like, figure out your own method, make mistakes, have fun, dance, do all the weird things, right? Because that's really what we're here for, is all those creative pockets versus looking good,
Yeah, and Cole, you said something earlier when you were talking about the dancing that I think is really important, and that is, what are you willing to do? Like, are you willing to look like an idiot?
Yeah.
You need to be. And
100%.
you won't look like an idiot. Like, you won't. You
Right.
won't. You're gonna feel like, well, it might feel like it, but you know how, like, so many times with a young conductor, they'll be up there and they think they're being super expressive, but then we watch the video and it's like total monotone kind of conducting. The same thing is true on the other end. Like, you feel like you're flailing around and looking like a crazy person, but it's not really how it reads. Like,
Yeah.
so you got to be willing to take risks. And if you're not willing to take risks, then I don't know that you're going to enjoy this thing very much.
Right.
Yeah. And your students also won't be willing to take risks if they don't see that from you. And that's what we want them to do. Be weird. That's what I always say. So,
Exactly.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us for this awesome conversation. Sean, were you about to say something else?
Oh, shoot, we're done?
I was just going to say, before we went into like our last little thing, if Dr. Axelson had any parting advice or any one-liner that you would like to say to our audience.
Two words.
Okay, no, you know what? Okay, no, I can't do 2 words, because why would I use 2 words when I could use 200, right? That's
Right.
my jam.
Exactly.
Okay, but can I say 2 different quotes that have been incredibly helpful?
Absolutely.
Okay, the second one will be from Mallory Thompson, in case I forget. So that'll be my prompt. Okay. So the first one, and this was at a conducting symposium when I was an undergrad, I can't remember who said it, but the quote they were quoting Sir Laurence Olivier. He was a great actor way, way long ago, long since passed. And they were talking about, he was at an acting like workshop thing, and someone was asking about how practicing and technique and stuff like that, and how he like refined his technique. And he talked about his goal, and he said, my goal is to have a technique so perfect that it ceases to exist. Right? So that I'm so well practiced and made all of my decisions that no one will ever hear them or see them, or you feel like that I'm so purely doing this role. Right. So I thought that was a very compelling thing to say. And then the second one that Mallory Thompson said to me, oh, if she hears this, please don't be mad. See, because like this has been such great advice. It hit differently when I first heard it, but now I get it. She said, I was talking one day in a lesson about, all the things and this happened, like just life stuff.
Was this undergrad or doctoral?
I think it was no, it had to have been undergrad, because I've had this in my brain. So it had to be undergrad. Okay. And I'm saying all these things, and I'm about my life, and then the piece, and we're working on pieces. She's asking me these questions, and I'm talking. And she stopped me and she said, nobody cares. And I was like, what? What do you mean nobody cares? But listen, I know my reaction was like, but how incredibly liberating is it to think to use that like nobody cares how busy you are, you still have to be prepared, but
Yeah.
at the same time nobody cares that you messed up that meter, right? So it's like quite liberating at the
Yeah,
same
for
time.
sure.
So, and then I lived in New Jersey for 14 years where literally nobody cares about you at all. And I got quite used to it. But I think it was the spirit in which she intended it, which we've joked about many times over the year, is that, that none of that, all that matters when you're doing the work, better say this, let all that matters when you're doing the work be the work. Like aim for that, right?
Mhm.
Really try to be focused on your study. And if that means you can only do 20 minutes at a time, then do 20 minutes at a time. We know that's a better practicing strategy for every instrument ever. So it's true here too. 3 hours on Sunday is not going to be as good as 20 minutes every day. So, just, I don't know. Those would be my two takeaways.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
So, transitioning into every episode, Dr. Axelson, we always end with some conductors to watch. So, Sean, why don't you start us off? Who's your pick?
Sure. So my conductor for this episode is Maestro John Devlin, and he is the music director of the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra, which I serve as the conducting fellow for, and also the conductor for the youth orchestra. So John has been an incredible mentor to me. So I think it's really great if anyone wants to look him up. He's on Facebook and Instagram. I know I've talked about his team a lot, Everything Conducting, which also has an Instagram. So I would definitely check them out if you have not already.
Can you spell that last name real quick?
Yes, it's
sorry.
Devlin. Devlin.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mine is Dr. Linda Hassler at Capital University. She's their DCA there. She is amazing. Specifically, there's this video that I think about for choir a lot, and it's "Please Stay" by Jake Renestad. I think they premiered the piece, but it's actually it's about suicide awareness and all the stuff that goes on in this piece. But her choirs sound amazing, and they actually do a lot of movement-based activities in the choral rehearsal. And she actually has, I think, a master class video out there talking about things. So I just challenge y'all to look it up. Please Stay. It's a gorgeous recording, but anything that you listen to by the Capital University singers is going to be top-notch for sure. So
I'm still writing. I'm writing all this down. Yeah, I want to see that masterclass about movement. See if there's stuff there that I could borrow from my group too.
Oh yeah,
and certainly my conducting students. So my conductor, this was hard because there's a lot of really great ones with lots of videos out there. You know what I mean? And I'm tempted, of course, Jerry Junkin, Mallory Thompson, H. Robert Reynolds, Michael Voda, all of my teachers and all the other people. Oh my gosh, there's so many. But if I have to pick one, I would pick Carlos Kleiber. He was an orchestral conductor, and he's passed away now. His last name is Kleiber, Carlos Kleiber. And I would particularly search for his recording, his video of Beethoven 7 with the Concertgebouw Orchestra in Amsterdam. And those of you young folks, don't be judgy about the quality of the video. It happened a long time ago, when I was your age. But it's not super grainy, but it ain't HD. You know what I mean? Right. But if you want to see groups playing behind the beat, that we were talking about earlier, that experience, if you want to see that, and you want to see someone who looks like the music all the time, you know what I mean? And if you see his technical conducting, you'd be like, I'm not sure he passed my conducting class. So you know what I mean? So the technique isn't always right on the money, but his music is so loud, it doesn't matter. You can his eyebrows are telling you more than his arms could. So it's really was a hugely inspiring video to me when I first saw it way back when I was a graduate student.
Yeah, great. I'm excited to look that up and watch for sure. Yeah. Well, Dr. Axelson, thank you so much for joining us for this new season, our first episode of the new season. We were so honored to have you join us and share all of your insight.
I'm happy to come. I'm happy to sit and talk about all things music and band. Just name the time and place. But thanks, Joe. This is a great podcast. It's so great that you're doing this to reach out to younger conductors, because we get isolated, right? And we think we're the only ones feeling the things. So this is really great. I'm really honored to be a part of it. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, great. Well, everyone, until next time, and we hope you all have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Right,
bye. Bye.